A new report shows storms, flooding and heat waves across Europe last year led to the loss of at least 335 lives.
The UK announces €140 million in aid to Sudan as today marks the second anniversary of the outbreak of its civil war.
Storms and flooding across Europe last year affected around 413,000 people, leading to the loss of at least 335 lives, according to a new report. The latest European State of the Climate report from the EU's Copernicus service estimated the impacts to have cost at least €18 billion in damages. Findings in the report by more than 100 scientific experts also showed storms were often severe, flooding was widespread, and record-breaking heat waves gripped parts of the continent. In September, storm Boris affected hundreds of thousands of people in parts of Germany, Poland, Austria and Hungary. Its impacts were also felt in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Romania and Italy. Wildfires in Portugal in September burned around 110,000 hectares of land in a week, while around 42,000 people in total were impacted by blazes across the continent. Experts from the Copernicus service and the World Meteorological Organization warned that an additional fraction of a degree of temperature rise matters, as it accentuates the risk to people's lives, to economies, and to the planet.
On the second anniversary of the outbreak of Sudan's civil war, UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy has announced €140 million in new aid during an international conference on Tuesday in London. Lammy stressed that the biggest obstacle is not funding but political will.
And today I'm announcing a further £120 million worth of support. But the biggest obstacle is not a lack of funding or texts at the United Nations. It's a lack of political will.
The conference aims to mobilize UK and EU humanitarian aid for Sudan, with neither the Sudanese government nor its paramilitary rival Rapid Support Forces invited. Meanwhile, Germany said it was pledging an additional $125 million for Sudan and the neighboring states. Tens of thousands of people have been killed by the conflict. According to the UN, over 12.6 million people have been forcibly displaced and some 25 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance and protection.
Uncertainty surrounds the venue for the next crucial round of nuclear talks between the US and Iran. On Tuesday, Iran's foreign ministry insisted the negotiations will return to Oman, where initial talks were held last weekend. This directly contradicts an announcement made just a day earlier by Italy and the Netherlands, with both saying talks were set to take place in Rome this Saturday. On its part, the US has yet to confirm a location. Hosting talks in Rome this weekend could also be complicated by the Easter holiday. The dispute comes as President Trump expressed on Monday regarding the speed of the talks, accusing Tehran of tapping the US along. A second US aircraft carrier is now operating in Mideast waters ahead of the talks, as Trump insists Iran must not obtain nuclear weapons and has threatened military action if talks fail. On the other side, Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei believes the talks are worth pursuing. However, he also said Iran does not fully trust the US, adding the phrase, "We know who we are dealing with." Meanwhile, the UN's nuclear chief plans to visit Iran this week, possibly over inspector access.
Hamas is sending a delegation to Qatar to continue indirect ceasefire talks with Israel over the war on Gaza, an official of the militant group has said. This comes after Hamas reportedly rejected an Israeli ceasefire proposal presented by Egypt because it includes a clause calling for their disarmament, which they refused. The proposal calls for the release of 10 hostages in exchange for a 45-day truce and the re-entry of food and shelter into Gaza. Israel has so far resisted negotiating towards ending the war because it says it wants to defeat Hamas first. Since a previous ceasefire deal fell apart last month, the Israeli military has continued its ground offensive and seized large parts of the enclave. Israel has also blocked the entry of all aid into Gaza to pressure Hamas to agree to a deal more aligned with their terms. The United Nations Humanitarian Office said on Monday that the humanitarian situation in Gaza is now likely the worst it has been since hostilities started in 2023.
The European Union has announced a financial aid package of up to €1.6 billion to support Palestinians and fund development initiatives in the West Bank, Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip. Over the course of 2 years, more than a third of the funding will go directly to the Palestinian Authority, aimed at improving financial sustainability, democratic governance and private sector development.
Our program aims to support the Palestinian people in building a sustainable future. It's about governing capacity, it's about advanced economic recovery, it's about strengthening the resilience of the private sector.
The announcement came as Israel expanded its offensive across Gaza over the weekend, striking a hospital in Gaza City and forcing patients to evacuate as attacks intensified across the Strip. Israel's military said in a statement it has struck more than 90 militant targets within 48 hours, including command centres, tunnels and weapons. Ukrainians are in mourning after at least 35 people, including children, were killed in a Russian attack on the city of Sumy on Palm Sunday. It was the second large-scale Russian attack to claim civilian lives in just over a week, striking an area housing a number of religious buildings, according to Ukraine's emergency services.
Люди йшли на богослужіння, тому дуже багато було травмованих, поранених, тіла навіть лежали тут на вулиці, тому
The attack has sparked international condemnation, which was welcomed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who called for more pressure on Russia to end the war.
Вони там в Москві зараз не бояться. І якщо не буде достатньо сильного тиску на Росію, вони надалі робитимуть те, до чого вони звикли. Надалі воюватимуть.
Meanwhile, Russia has claimed the missiles were targeting Ukrainian military commanders and their Western colleagues in Sumy, insisting its forces only strike military targets.
Hungary's parliament has passed an amendment to the constitution that allows the government to ban public events by LGBTQ+ communities. The amendment declares that children's rights to moral, physical and spiritual development supersede any right other than the right to life, including the right to peaceful assembly. The amendment, which required a 2/3 vote, passed along party lines with 140 votes for and 21 against. Legal scholars and critics are calling this another step towards authoritarianism. It was proposed by the ruling Fidesz-KDNP coalition led by Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Hungary's centrist Momentum political party MPs and activists attempted to block government MPs from entering parliament to vote, but police intervened. The amendment upholds a ban on public LGBTQ+ events, including Budapest Pride.
Ilyen elemi indulatot váltott ki belőlem, amire úgy érzem, hogy függetlenül attól, hogy milyen stratégiai megfontolásaim vannak, valahogy ezt le kell vezetnem, és valahogy részt kell vennem a társadalmi ellenállásban, ez ellen a tényleg szörnyűséges törvényjavaslat ellen.
Szerintem Magyarország már túllépte azt a határt, ahol átfordultunk demokráciából, talán még az autokráciából is egy nem egy jó irányba.
Budapest's mayor, who spoke at the protest, called on people to gather for Pride, which he said will be bigger, freer and prouder than ever before.
Greece has signed an agreement with France for the purchase of 16 anti-ship missiles as part of its mission to bolster its defence through arms procurement. Greek Defence Minister Nikos Dendias formally signed the deal in Athens on Monday alongside his French counterpart Sebastian Lecornu.
Η Ελλάδα είναι πάντοτε βέβαιη, ότι η Γαλλία θα λαμβάνει υπόψη στις αποφάσεις της την ασφάλεια της Ελλάδας και την ανάγκη να διατηρεί η Ελλάδα συγκριτικό τεχνολογικό πλεονέκτημα αποτροπής έναντι των δυνάμεων του αναθεωρητισμού. Είναι γνωστό σε όλους, δεν το έχουμε κρύψει, η Ελλάδα δεν απειλεί, αλλά απειλείται.
It's the latest in a series of purchases of military equipment from France and comes as Athens has said it will spend 25 billion euros over the next decade to modernise its military. The programme is largely aimed at addressing tensions with neighbouring Turkey amid their long-standing disputes over boundaries in the Aegean Sea and Eastern Mediterranean.
The US government has frozen over $2 billion in funding for Harvard University. It follows Harvard's refusal to meet Trump administration demands to curb campus activism. This is the 7th time the government has withheld funds from a major university, most of them being Ivy League schools, pressuring them to comply with its political agenda. Demands include governance reforms, changes to admission policies, auditing views of diversity on campus, and not recognizing certain student groups. To support its view, the administration has cited concerns over anti-Semitism during last year's pro-Palestine protests on university campuses. But Harvard President Alan Garber has rejected its demands and said the university will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. The government announced the funding freeze shortly afterwards. Meanwhile, Washington has launched investigations and detained and deported a number of foreign students in relation to pro-Palestinian protests.